Hey everyone, welcome back to another mining chamber video. In today's video, we are going to be covering server PSUs and we're going to go in depth about the breakout boards, the different cables, and as well as how much watts can you pull out of these cables and how you should use them for your GPU mining rigs. And then we will give you 3 different ways of using these server PSUs for your mining rig. Before we jump into the server PSU topic, I first want to thank you guys for helping us reach 10,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome and we are planning on doing a huge giveaway soon. So please stay tuned for the next 2 videos. It will have information on the giveaway and hopefully we will be selecting the winners in around the beginning of January. And one more thing I also want to cover before we get into the server PSU video, and it is to address the power limit on the 6 or 8 pin cables. So we previously covered the ATX PSUs in details and we said that the 8 pin PCIe cables carry around 288 watts. Some people said it carries around only 150 watts while the 6 pin carries 75 watts. So after extensive research to debunk this issue, I believe I found the explanation that we all needed. So after browsing through multiple different articles and write-ups about this topic, I came across GPUminingresources.com, which has a beautiful write-up about this topic, and they go in so much details about it and explain why there's so much confusion regarding to this topic. So first let's look at the first paragraph they have on there, which explains the situation of what's going on and why people have different opinions regarding this topic. The problem lies in the fact that the PCIe-CIG is the proprietary owner of the PCIe connector design, and it costs a lot to even view the PCIe connector electrical specification. Furthermore, the specifications rate the maximum power draw far under what some armchair electricians think that the maximum power draw should be given to the gauge of the wires involved. So the PCIe-CIG lists that the maximum rating of 6-pin PCIe connector at 75 watts and its 8-pin PCIe connector at 150 watts. That is the safe rating, and you can go any higher than that at your own risk. So as you guys can see, the reason that people think it's 75 watts and it's 150 watts, or they think it's more than that, it's due to different opinions. So the first opinion, it's through the company itself that made the connector, which says that the safe rating is 75 watts for 6-pin and then 150 watts for the 8-pin. And as of the armchair electricians, they think otherwise due to the gauge of the wires involved. So due to these 2 different opinions, we have a lot of confusion going on. So now if we go further down, as you guys can see here, they have the illustrations for the regular power supply connections for the ATX power supply. And then they also have a beautiful illustration about how you should use 2 power supplies in a system. So just connecting the GPU and the riser on the same power supply to avoid any voltage inconsistency. And then if we go further down, these are the details about the 8-pin and the 6-pin connectors and how much power they can carry. So there are 2 important factors that we need to get out of this. Is first, there's a wiring capacity. So the wire is going to be what's holding the pins together. So from one pin to another pin, there is the wire and how much power it can carry. And these wires go with a measurement called AWG, which stands for American Wire Gauge. And generally, the lower the better. So if you have 16 gauge wires, then that will be able to hold more power than an 18 gauge wire. And generally, the power supplies come with a 16 gauge wire, as far as I've read so far. So what that means is that we don't need to worry about the wire itself burning down, because usually what ends up burning in a power supply connector is the pins themselves. So now if we go down to the crimp terminals, which is basically the little metal connectors in the pins themselves. So with the crimp terminals, the more that you have on a cable, the better, the more watts that it can carry. So if we take a look a little bit further down, we can see here, if you see a 5-pin terminals, then there are 2 circuits, which is max of 9 amp times 2, which is 18 amps total, and then you multiply that by 12 volts, which gives you 216 watts, which that applies to usually 6-pin connectors. They would have only 5-pin terminals and then 1 blank. And then if you see the 6+ pin terminals, there are 3 circuits, which is max of 8 amps times 3, gives you 24 amps, and you multiply that by 12 volts, and then that gives you 288 watts. And that's how they have the measurements on the illustrations, which is 216 watts maximum for 6 pins and then 288 watts for the 8 pin. So here we have an example of 3 different cables. We have first, the regular cable for the server PSU that connects to the breakout board, which is a 6-pin to an 8-pin. And if we take a look at the bottom of it, we can see here there's 6 different terminals. So that means we are able to push a max of 288 watts through this cable. And then the wire itself is a 16 gauge wire, so it is going to be safe for both ends. And then in the middle, we have another example, which is a splitter, just a regular splitter for 8-pin to dual 8-pin. And then we can see here the dual 8 pins, they also have 8 terminals, which is going to be the same measurement, 288 watts maximum. And then finally, the last example we have is a SATA to 6-pin. That's why you should never use these. So as you can see with the SATA to 6-pin, we're missing one crimp terminal, so the wattage that you can deliver with these cables is very minimum, and that's why they always end up burning. So that's why I would avoid using SATA to 6-pin completely. Just get rid of these connectors and don't use them ever. So now that we have that information, I hope it explains it for you guys. And obviously still try to be safe due to the ratings that's provided by the proprietary owner of the PCIe cable pins themselves, which is the 75 watts on the 6-pin and then 150 watts on the 8-pin. Not because we said, okay, you can push it to 288 watts, that means you should overload your cables. Always try to balance it out and try to use as minimum as possible and spread it between as much cables as possible. So I hope this answered the questions and cleared confusions regarding to this topic. I myself understood it a little bit better now. I still think there's a couple of more things that we need to dig into further. For example, making sure that the wiring capacity of ATX power supplies is 16 gauge. So now that being said, guys, we will leave the link for this article in the descriptions below. Please go check it out and read through it. Maybe you'll understand something that we missed on. And also, if you have anything to add on this, please add it in the comment sections below. We will make sure to read it up and see if we have to do a second part for the ATX power supply video. Now finally, let's get back to the server PSUs and let's talk about the server PSUs. Server PSUs are an alternative to using regular ATX PSUs. Although most beginners don't find comfort in using them since they're not covered as much as an ATX PSU, and we're also guilty of that since we've only used ATX PSUs for our mining rig builds so far. But after doing this video, I've seen a lot of benefits for using server PSUs, and one of those benefits are that they are super cheap, really affordable, and more reliable than an ATX PSU. And they can also be used in multiple different ways, and you can also combine them with an ATX PSU if you want, which we will cover more later on with the 3 different strategies. So the main pros of it is that it is very efficient, and then it is also very cheap. But then the cons of using a server PSU is that they're super loud and they get really hot. So if you're trying to mine, for example, in your bedroom, or you want to have a mining rig in the living room, then server PSUs is definitely not for you. It will be pretty loud. You can modify the fans and change them and put a more quiet one in there. So if you want to do that, you can go with that path. But generally, ATX PSUs for rigs that you want to build in your bedroom or anywhere where there's conversation, I wouldn't recommend getting a server PSU. So now to use a server PSU for your mining rigs, you need 3 important parts. First, it's the PSU itself. These PSUs can be found in multiple different places, so you can find them in places like ParallelMiner.com, or you can look at eBay.com and you can find multiple different options there. But for this video, we are going to focus on ParallelMiner because they do provide a lot of details as well with the server PSU, so you guys will be able to know exactly what you're buying. It is also completely fine to buy from eBay, so you guys can check them out. Just make sure that the seller has reviews and it's not a new seller. And buying refurbished server PSUs is completely fine as well because they are made to run 24/7 and they're very robust. So try to check out different offers and see which place it is better for you to buy it from. So now if we go back to ParallelMiner, we can see here we have the HP 1200 watt power supply. This is the most common amongst miners for rigs that are 6 cars and such. So with this option right here, you guys can pick whether it comes with cables or not, and let's do it without cables for now so we can just focus on the PSU. So a 1200 watt would come out at $48, and comparing that to an ATX power supply, the price is definitely very different. So now let's focus on the important things when you're buying the server PSUs. There's things that you need to keep in mind. So for example, the first thing is that the input voltage, so this one can run onto 110 volts to 240 volts. And if you're running it at 110 to 120 volts, the maximum output that you'll be getting out of it is 900 watts. So keep that in mind. Make sure that you know what circuitry is running in your house. So if you do run it on a 200 to 240 volts, you'll be able to get the maximum 1200 watts of the PSU. But then of course, just run them at 80% to remain safe. So instead of 1200 watts, just run them at around 1000 watts. You'll be completely fine there. And then for efficiency, they are at 94% efficient. And you can connect these to a PDU, which is always 200 to 240 volts. So you'll be able to utilize the maximum wattage out of these power supplies. And there are more details, which is the breakout board and the cables, which we will cover next. But first, let's go over different server PSUs. So the 1200 watt power supply, this is just one example. Now if we take a look at the HP 750 watt power supply, it's the same thing. We can go back down here, check the input level, make sure that you're fine. So this one for 110 volts to 240 volts, you can run it at 750 watt, which is completely fine. But again, 80% rule. And then there's also this one, which is a 2400 watt power supply. This is great for a big project like a 14 graphic card mining rig or 12 graphic cards mining rig. But then for this one, you only can run it on 200 to 240 volts. So you can't run this on a regular 110 volt circuit. And of course, that is due to it being able to produce so much power. So 2400 watts is a really high number. So just keep these in mind when you're buying one and get the one that's proper for your environment and your home. So that covers it for the PSU itself. And now we can go ahead and talk about the breakout board. So you can find breakout boards on ParallelMiner.com or also on eBay.com, but just when you're buying it, make sure that the compatibility is correct. So now let's go back to ParallelMiner and let's look at the options they have here. So I have a couple opened in different tabs. So for this one, for example, it has 6 pins on each side. So that's really good for running 6 graphic cards or even more if you want. You can run 1 GPU on each 6 pin and then 1 riser on another 6 pin. So if we go further down, you guys will be able to find a full compatibility list for the breakout boards. So it says power supply expected compatibility list, and then it gives you exactly which ones it's compatible with. So if we go to another one here, which has 4 6 pins on each side, so this would be great for an 8 GPU rig. And then you would scroll down, you'd also find another compatibility power supply list here. So the main thing about breakout boards is to confirm that it is compatible with your power supply, and it is the main interface that you're going to be plugging into it, all the GPUs. So now finally, the last thing we want to talk about are the cables. So the cables are usually a 6 pin to an 8 pin, and you can find those on ParallelMiner or on eBay like I mentioned. So if you look through ParallelMiner, you'll find different measurements. So there's a 36-inch one, 12-inch, 17-inch, and then if you click on it, you'll find more details about it. So for example, if you go a little bit down, you'll see the PCIe cable specifications. So since it's a 16 gauge cable, it can carry around 400 watts, but then just remember you want to balance it out through the pins. Since it has 6 terminals, which is the 6 pins that connect to the breakout board, you don't want to go over 288 watts since the wire can handle it, but the pins are not going to be able to handle it. So the cables come for a really cheap price, so you guys can just add as much as you want. Usually I would go with at least 12 cables to start off with for a 6 GPU rig, and if you have an 8 GPU rig, I would go with 16 cables. So like that, you have 1 cable per GPU using a splitter if it's a 2/8 pin, and then you have 1 cable per splitter. So that is it for the parts of the server PSU. If you guys want to check out all these parts, we will have the links for them in the descriptions below that take you to ParallelMiner.com. The link will be an affiliate link, so it will help us get a little bit of a cut from it. So if you guys would like to support the channel, please feel free to use the link, or otherwise you guys can check if you can find them on eBay or any local sellers. But I do recommend ParallelMiner and nerdgears.com since you can find them there for pretty decent prices, plus the support that both of these platforms will provide. So now let's go ahead and jump into 3 different strategies for using your server PSU for your mining rigs.
Hey there, my name is Cursed Mining and I have the honor to take over one part of the video today. What if you want to run your rig only from server PSUs? If you listened to the cable overview before, you might have realized, wait, there are only 6 pin cables there. You can adapt those to say Molex if you need, but what about the CPU 8 pin and motherboard 24 pin? For this we need an additional little gadget, and these are called Pico style PSUs. That's just the name of one brand, by the way. Basically we could call them DC PSUs. Pico gives you that 24 pin back and is powered by 6 pin to DC power. Basically it's a little power supply in itself, but you power it from the server PSU. Most Pico style PSUs also allow you to connect additional Molex or SATA. If running your rig with an SSD for your operating system, you should use the SATA of the Pico PSU to power it, otherwise you might encounter some weirdnesses or it might not get recognized. Please don't power a riser or GPU with that SATA connector. What I've done though is that I've powered a riser with the additional Molex connector you get, which is no problem. And yes, these are perfect for small silent builds too, as you can get them in different wattages. But this is not the place here today. Maybe some building inspiration. Why even go through the hassle? Well, if you already have large enough ATX PSUs and all the cable you need for your GPU rig, there's no harm in using that. I just love the versatility of HP server PSUs, and as mentioned, you can generally find them much cheaper. You can switch them around easily and have multitudes of possibilities with your cables. And I also never had problems with mixing different cables, because as you know, with an ATX PSU you should never mix cables between brands or even different models of these same brands. For server PSUs this is fine. For example, I use Corsair 6 pin to Molex cable to power risers from an HP server PSU. When you run out of slots, just get a bigger breakout board and still no hassle, and you can just switch it up. Those slots are universal. Besides, don't be worried when you mostly see them used. They are tanks and can last for many years, depending on the shop you get them from, say a mining shop or a server supply repurposer. You might even get units with warranty. I have to say I had none fail in my mining career yet. I cannot say that from ATX PSUs. That's it for this part on how you can power your rig from only server PSUs, and now back to mining chamber. Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations to 10k. See you soon. Happy mining and bye.
Thank you so much Cursed Mining for taking part of this video and going over the Pico adapters. You've done a great job explaining them, and please everyone, if you haven't subscribed to Cursed Mining, please make sure to check him out. He does really nice videos with a really nice style that I like, and I'm sure that you guys will like it as well, so please make sure to check him out. The link will be in the descriptions below to subscribe to his channel. Now that he covered the Pico adapters, we can go ahead and talk about using dual server PSUs, and then that will take us to our third method, which is using an ATX PSU and a server PSU. So with dual server PSUs, it would be the same way that you would use a dual ATX PSU. Just the main idea is that you want to get them both to turn on at the same time, or you can try to manually turn them on. But with server PSUs, there's an easier method to do that. So the first method is using the breakout board 4-pin. That 4-pin will connect from a different power supply. So if you have two different power supplies, you'd connect power supply 1, which is the main one that's powering the motherboard as well, whether you're using Pico adapter or whichever way you're powering the motherboard. And then you can use this 4-pin to Molex adapter and connect that 4-pin to the breakout board of the second PSU. And that way you can just automatically boot up the second PSU as soon as you turn on the system. Now if you use a Pico adapter, you should have a Molex cable, so you can use that Molex cable to connect to that Molex to 4-pin. If you don't have a Molex to 4-pin adapter, you can just try to find one on Amazon, and some breakout boards also have a Molex port on them instead of a 4-pin. So just make sure that your breakout board has what you need, and then from there you can use it the way that you're supposed to use it. And then there's also one more way that you can use a dual server PSU setup. While I was making this video, I reached out to ParallelMiner and they sent me a link to this breakout board that has a Pico built into it, which is really awesome. So that means you don't need to really buy a Pico adapter, which you can also find on their website, and you can connect to it the cables that come with it, which is the 24-pin and then the Molex as well as the SATA cable and the CPU cable. So it's a really sweet thing to have, and then you can plug this into one of the power supplies, and then the other power supply will be just a regular breakout board without the Pico parts, and then from there you can use it normally just like you would use any other PSU. And another nice thing about dual server PSUs is that you can accurately see which power supply is drawing more power. So with the breakout board that you have, there's a little meter on it that will show you how much amps are being drawn out of the breakout board, which is a really nice way to just calculate your watts instead of having to get a wall meter. So now that we covered dual server power supplies, let's talk about our third method, which is using the server power supply side by side with an ITX or an ATX power supply. So for this method, it doesn't really vary from the dual server PSUs. It's exactly the same thing. Just imagine that you have a server PSU with the Pico breakout board or the Pico adapter, which would be the ATX power supply in this scenario, and then the other server PSU will just be the secondary power supply, which you would plug into with the 4-pin just to make sure that it does turn on at the same time with your primary PSU. So for ITX power supplies, you guys will be able to find really cheap ITX power supplies that are like 400 watts and less on Amazon or eBay. I mean, generally the server power supplies themselves are still cheaper, but ITX can be used if you already have an ITX power supply laying around, so you can make that to use by just powering the motherboard, CPU, as well as the storage device you're running on your system, and then you would use a server PSU to power all the GPUs. And that would go to the same way with ATX power supplies. If you have a 1200 watt power supply ATX and you have a server power supply and you want to build like a 12 GPU mining rig, in that case you can pair up both of these power supplies together using your ATX power supply as the main one and then the server PSU as your secondary one. All you will need to do is just power up the 4-pin and then use each power supply to power a certain number of cards with their risers, and make sure to power the GPU and its riser through one power supply. So now that covers 3 methods to use your server power supplies. Now the last thing I want to cover is how you should be powering your GPUs using server power supplies, which we briefly covered when we were talking about breakout boards, but I'm just going to go over it slightly more here. So breakout boards usually have a minimum of 12 6 pins. And what I would do is I would use each 6 pin to power one GPU, and if your GPU uses dual 8 pin, then you can use a splitter and power that GPU with that 6 pin. Then you would use the other 6 pin to power the riser. And one more thing to keep in mind with the breakout boards, try to balance the power on both ends of the breakout board. So if you'd use a slot from the left side of the breakout board, try to also use a slot from the right side so that you're putting power on both ends, and then like that you'll be safe and you'll be good to go with server power supplies. Now that is it for server power supplies. We gave you guys 3 different ways to use them, and then we covered all the basics about them. If you think we've missed anything out or you have any additional tips, please leave them in the comments below. And we also have one more thing. ParallelMiner was kind enough to give us a coupon code to give you guys, so if you purchase off of their site, you can get a 10% off using Mining Chamber coupon code. So just apply it on the checkout and you'll get your discount, and then you can enjoy the products that you purchased. So thank you ParallelMiner for providing the coupon code. And I also want to apologize for posting this video late. I did take 2 weeks off of posting videos, but hopefully this year in 2021, I'm looking to start posting 2 videos a week. As for the 10,000 subscribers milestone giveaway, it will be featured in next week's video, so please make sure to watch that video when it comes out. It will be about 2021 and what's my plan in 2021 with mining and the channel. And I'll also be answering questions, so if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. They don't need to be related to cryptocurrency mining, but if you have specific questions, you can also leave them there, and then I will answer them as much as I can in the next week's video. So now that being said, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if you have any feedback, leave it in the comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful new year.